Welcome back to Speaking with Confidence, a podcast that helps you build the soft skills that lead to real results. Communication, storytelling, public speaking, and showing up with confidence in every conversation that counts. I'm Tim Newman, a recovering college professor turned communication coach, and I'm thrilled to guide you on a journey to becoming a powerful communicator. Today's guest is Dr. Melissa Robinson-Winemiller. Dr. Winemiller's goal is to help leaders become the visionaries of the future by teaching them how to use empathy as something that's skills-based, data-driven, and outcomes-oriented. After being forced to leave academia and a flourishing musical career, she continued to ask how leaders could be so unempathetic and a system so broken. Fast forward, and she's so passionate about this single emotional intelligence skill that she's dedicated her life to understanding what it is, how we use it, and how it can drive profit, productivity, and innovation. Whether on the TEDx stage, in her book, or through her continued research, Melissa's goal is to change the world one heart at a time. Melissa, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim. I'm so excited to be here. You and your audience allowing me to be on. Thank you.
Well, I mean, you have such an interesting backstory. You were a traveling musician for a long, long time. And can you just, before we get into the weeds, can you just talk about that a little bit? You know, what that was like, you know, the traveling the world, you know, being on stages, playing music, who you played with, your best memory, all those types of things that really kind of, you know, for the lay people like me, yeah, we love musicians and the travel and we think it's all these other things. Give us a little bit of background on that for us.
Absolutely. It was all I ever wanted to be. Like when I was young, I didn't know what I wanted. I mean, you know, I played piano a little bit, and it's not like I came from a musical family. It was something that I just loved. So as I got older, I decided this is what I was going to do because I might be broke, but I was going to be happy. You know, musicians aren't known for being wealthy. So, and, you know, I actually consider myself very fortunate because I got to do a lot of things that I wouldn't have gotten to do otherwise. Like I got to go be a soloist in Rome for a summer. I mean, hang out in Rome for a summer on someone else's dime.
That's terrible. I don't know how you did it. I mean, that's awful.
Oh, the pasta was terrible. You know, or I got to tour Hungary. I got to tour Amsterdam. I toured all over the U.S. and I got to meet people that I wouldn't have gotten to meet otherwise. Yeah. I got to play with Ray Charles. And
oh my goodness.
I can tell you that it's funny because, you know, these people, these big names, they each have their own thing. Like Ray Charles was like, don't talk to me. It was in our contract. Don't talk to me. Don't come near me. Do not approach me. Do not anything. And it's like, okay, that's fine. And then in a different job that I did, I was working with David Ogden Stiers. Your audience might remember him. He was Winchester on MASH. He was in Beauty and the Beast. Okay. Yeah, that guy. And he was fantastic. He was brilliant. He wanted to talk. He was like a French horn player. That's what I played. Mm-hmm. And he was a French horn player in his younger days. And he wanted to talk all about it and was really warm and open. And, you know, so it just depended. But these aren't people that I would have met just hanging out. You know, music gave me a lot of opportunities I just wouldn't have had otherwise.
Well, you talk about David Ogden Stiers. He actually played the French horn in a couple episodes of MASH.
Yes.
So now that makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, and now that I know that, it kind of makes me think about, you know, was that something that he said, okay, let's add this, or was it in the script, or, you know, it's some of those things that really make you think about how they put shows together and really make you feel like these people are real people, not a TV show. That's amazing. How did, you know, traveling and playing music and going all over the world, how did that inform you in terms of life skills, communication skills, the whole idea of you know, how we actually communicate with people and what we value from that communication?
Oh man, it was invaluable. I mean, if I think about it in terms of that, both as a performer and as a teacher, you know, because as a performer, music is one way to communicate. Like when I was in Rome, most of the orchestra was Italian. So it's not like even
Wow.
among the musicians, there was a lot of communication, I mean,
Mhm.
from the people from different countries, sure, but for in between. But yet when we were making music and the conductor was bringing us through whatever it was, everybody knew exactly what to do. We understood the communication. We knew how this was supposed to
Mhm.
be. Even though, we couldn't necessarily have a conversation, we could absolutely communicate.
Right.
It just, was a different language,
Mhm.
really, and then to take that and understand that as you're communicating with other people, whether it's playing from the stage or, touring with these groups or in talking to some of the people like I was telling you about, David and I had lots of conversations about music. We had huge communication centered around this. But the cool thing about it is if you're a musician, whether you're talking to your audience or you're talking to other people or whatever you're doing, you already have something in common.
Right.
So
Right.
you can start right there.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And I tell people that with this podcast, I've been blessed, and it's opened up my eyes about a lot of things. Things that I never really thought that I would be able to do or talk to people. And we're talking to people all over the world with the podcast. And one of the things I found is, we're all struggling with the same types of things. We're all struggling with the idea of connection. We're all struggling with how we become clear, how we get people to understand us, how we understand other people. And
Yeah.
it's in a way, it's so good to hear that it's not just me, it's not just us, that other people are struggling with the same thing and finding ways to be able to connect with people. And music is one way that you can actually do that.
Yes. Yes. And you can do it in different generations. You can do it in different nations. You can do it in places where otherwise you might not have anything in common at all.
Right. That's amazing. And the other thing with you that again, part of your amazing backstory that is to me is just incredible and phenomenal. You had that other life as being a musician, and then you transitioned into the life of academia, and we'll get into that. I don't even like talking about that. I mean, academia that's so last year. But
Yes.
but
Yes.
but you've been on stages almost your entire life playing music. What was it like transitioning from being on stage as a musician to being on stages and being in front of people as a communicator, as a speaker?
It was kind of a shock, honestly. And your audience actually might be interested in hearing this because, I mean, stage fright and being in front of people and being able to communicate well is something I think we all deal with. But I think it's important to say, I was on stage from the time I was 6, 8, something like that.
Wow.
And so I was very comfortable on stage.
Mm-hmm.
When I had my French horn with me, and like if I was doing a recital, I could talk a little bit about the music or I could, do that kind of thing. But all of a sudden, when I had to put that horn down and actually go out and speak and I was the instrument,
Right.
it was a whole different ball game. And it's a set of skills I've had to learn and finesse.
Yeah. So what changes did you have to make? What mindset changes did you have to make? Because again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to me, I kind of liken it to, Linus and his blanket, right? You're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Kind of. So I don't know how true this is, but psychologically, I mean, because, I worked with singers, I worked in operas, I did that kind of thing. And there was always this psychological aspect to singing because for me, my instrument was outside of myself, right? French horn's out here. I put it in the case. It's done. For a singer, you are your instrument, which means that anything you do, anything you say, if I'm going to drink hot liquids, I'm going to drink cold liquids. I'm going to go out the night before and to go to a concert. I slept and the window was open. It all affects your instrument. So you don't get to disconnect from it ever. It is who you are. The other part of that is as long as you have an external instrument, psychologically, you have a barrier between you and your audience.
Right.
Same as you would with a podium or a microphone stand or anything like that.
Right.
Which is very different than being an opera singer or being someone who's speaking and you go out and there is nothing between you and the audience. You are very vulnerable.
Mhm.
So it's a completely different mindset. And that's
Yeah.
as close as I can come to putting the two together.
You bring up some really good points that I didn't really think about from a singer's perspective. And you hear people talk about it. A singer's got a cold, so they're not going to perform today, or they're going to postpone a show. But a cold could really be a real problem if you, as a singer, if you try and push through it. From your vocal cords, from a whole bunch of other things, you could damage them, and the sound is going to be different. And to me, everything is about providing value to your audience, right? And if your sound isn't going to be what you want your sound to be, are you truly providing the value for those people that are paying their discretionary dollars to come and see you in their free time, right? And so I think there's a lot of other things to think about. Again, I never thought about, what you drink, hot versus cold, alcohol versus non-alcohol, staying up late, getting sleep. It's so important for, a number of different things, but I never really thought about it from a singer's perspective as well.
Oh yeah. And in fact, you kind of have to be careful, because if you do try to muscle through this stuff, you can do damage.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about like Julie Andrews, right?
Oh,
One
yeah.
of the best of the best. And she had vocal node surgery, and she hasn't sang since because it ruined her vocal cords. So
that's a shame.
Yeah, it is. It truly is.
As I'm thinking, I may have made a reference that our audience may not know with Linus, in his blanket. But, go look up Charlie Brown. You'll figure it out.
There you go.
So you transitioned from being a traveling musician into academia, and what was that like? Teaching students, and how did you have to change your communication style to really connect with students, to get them to understand what you're trying to teach? And for me, I think connecting with students is one of the hardest things to do, because you've got, let's just say, 30 students in a classroom at a time. They all learn a little bit different. They all listen a little bit differently. They all pay attention a little bit differently, and trying to teach them something. It's about really connecting with them as a group, but also individually. So how did you make that transition? What did you learn there?
The funny thing about music is that when you're doing it right, it's 80% listening and 20% making noise. And I think that teaching,
wow,
that's really what it is. It's 80% listening to make sure you're fitting into everything that's going on around you. And then 20% of the time you're actually making noise. And teaching, I thought, was the same thing. I needed to be listening and know what my students were doing and understand and connect with them, whether it was a room of 100 or, one-on-one private lessons. So it's still 80% listening and 20% making noise.
Wow. That is, that's so simple, especially when we think about the whole idea that, you and I talked, I think the biggest piece of communication is listening to begin with. And that just really kind of puts it in a nutshell for you, right? I mean, if you're listening, you've got a much better chance of actually connecting with the rest of the students. That's so impactful. So 80% listening, 20% making noise. Audience, write that down. That's a good one. It's so impactful and so poignant and simple to understand that, if you keep that in mind for pretty much everything you do, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, I agree. That's something that has stuck with me throughout, and it seems to apply across the board.
Mm-hmm. So let's get into the idea of your specialty, empathy and emotional intelligence. Number one, I think our educational system is broken, top to bottom, left to right, up to down, diagonals, every which way that we look at it. And one of the biggest issues from my perspective is we don't ever really teach students, number one, how to think, which impacts them truly understanding who they are as individuals. And that's, to me, where we start to get that emotional intelligence, and trying to get them to understand, you really have to know who you are as an individual before you can really go and connect, and provide value to others.
Yeah. Well, number one, I mean, we talked about this. I'm a recovering academic too. So I'm with you 110% on all of that. I'll just say we can just drop the mic.
Right.
That's perfect. And I do agree with you that the system is broken in how we're teaching students. And I think a lot of it has to do with this idea of we're turning out a product. We're turning out a product. We're turning out, and the professors are treated very much the same way. We're cogs in a machine. You turn out a product, and people aren't products.
Right.
I mean, these are people who are growing. They're at very, important times in their lives when they're learning how they want to be and who they want to be and how they want to get there. Mm-hmm. And as teachers, we should be able to help them and mentor them as much as we can. It shouldn't just be widgets, cogs. Right. And unfortunately, that's a lot of what I saw.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, again, top to bottom, in the institutions that I was in was the same way. My wife was a retired public school teacher, same types of things. And, if we don't teach them when they're younger how to think, mm-hmm. or that emotional intelligence, to know who they are, to be able to control their emotions, to be able to, truly be able to feel, things and be able to act and react on them in the moment. Okay. What ends up happening is they get to be my age and they can't figure out why they haven't been successful. They can't figure out why they can't keep a job. They can't figure out, all these different types of life skills, but that also goes to the leaders of teams and organizations who haven't done that and how they actually treat the people on their teams.
Yes, absolutely. There were two really important studies done. One was by Bontrager and Marquez. I don't remember the other one now, but they actually went through and surveyed a couple of business schools, and they gave them top 10, important skills they needed to have, and there was the usual ones, statistics, human capital resource, And these are in business schools. So we're talking our education system. And at the bottom, every time, was empathy. These students didn't value it because they hadn't been taught that it was something to be valued.
Right. And, I look back at my career and, I try and be somebody that is caring and helpful and wants to do the right thing for both the individual person, the organization, et cetera. And I tell people all the time, when I make decisions, sometimes I make decisions that it doesn't work out well for me, right? Because it's not about me. It's about what's best for you or the team or what have you. And sometimes it's not going to work out for me. And that's, you have to be okay with that. And there's times I can look back on my career in a couple of different scenarios very vividly where one, I did things that if my administration knew that I did, I'd be in trouble. But to me, it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But also there were times when I didn't know what the right thing to do was. And that, ate at me because, I make a decision and sometimes it worked out right. Sometimes it had the opposite effect. And I think that's something that we as individuals also have to learn. That's part of that emotional intelligence thing, is to be able to think things through, make the best decision that you actually that you possibly can, and go with it.
Yes, I agree. I mean, because in what you're talking about, you're not just thinking about your emotions, you're thinking about the emotions of others. You're not just thinking about your situation, but the situation of others. And the beautiful thing with empathy, I mean, people assume that it's all feeling, and it's not. It's actually understanding and connection. Mm-hmm. But when it's at its best, it goes in both directions.
Right.
So as you're trying to have empathy and be a good leader through this understanding and connection, other people can look at you and say, you know what, he's doing the best he can with what he has at the time. Let's jump in and do the best we can to help him out as well.
Right. And so what have you found in working with leaders, teams, and organizations about emotional intelligence and empathy? And what are the biggest challenges that you're facing in terms of getting them to understand that they've got it? That number one, at least, and after reading your book, I'm glad we agree on this, that these are skills. It's not something that you're born with. These are skills that we can learn and get better at practicing them.
Yeah.
So what are the biggest challenges you're facing in terms of working with teams and organizations about understanding the benefits of having emotional intelligence and the benefits of having empathy?
The first one that I run into a lot is, and especially with some from older generations, or that are very mired in this is the way we do things because we've always done it this way and this is how we're going to do it kind of thing, is actually explaining this is what empathy is and this is how it helps. It is data driven. It is results oriented. Mm-hmm. It is skills based. This isn't a touchy feely thing because business has to get done. Mm-hmm. I mean, at the end of the day, from an empathy standpoint, if you have no business, then you're not helping anybody.
Right.
So this organism has to be able to function. It isn't all touchy-feely and coddling to the point that this business is going to sink, because that doesn't help anybody.
Right.
But it is something that will increase innovation, will increase productivity, will increase profit. And I kind of get this. Are you sure? This isn't what I thought it was. And it's like, no, let me show you, let me explain, and let me take you through it. And it's a lagging indicator. It's not going to be immediate, but you'll be amazed over time what it'll do. Right.
Right. And what happens? How do you go about working with a leader or an organization in building that emotional intelligence and empathy? Because I kind of picture things in my head that they get it for a second and then they fight you and they said, no, it's not going to work. And then they get it for a second, then they fight you, and then they get it for a second again, and it's kind of, it just seems to me that because it's so ingrained in the fabric of business and society of change, how does that process go?
Usually if I can get them to stick with it long enough that they start to see results, that's mm-hmm. when they go, oh, that crazy redhead lady was right. That did work. Yeah. Oh, look at that. Their profits are better. We have better productivity. Our employee engagement scores are up. All of a sudden we got people coming out of the woodwork to give us innovative ideas that are going to make things better. Whoa, who knew? And once they see the results and just how simple it really is, I mean, it's, you have to practice it, right? It's not a performance. Right. It's not something you do one time. It's a practice. It's something you do every day. But once they get a hold of that, it's kind of like, oh, and then it's just a matter of habit building. But at first, sometimes, and I'll admit, if I have someone that's just like dead against it and think that I can come in and just, put it in a box and make it work, I won't take those people on, because they don't want to learn, they want me to mm-hmm. fix it. They don't want to learn how to fix it.
Yeah. And you can't fix it. I mean, that's the, and well, let's go down that road for a second here. Mm-hmm. Can it be fixed? So let's say, pick a scenario where leadership has truly alienated their team. They've truly alienated their organization. How difficult, and can that be fixed? Can that be, come in and change that culture? And I'm definitely not overnight, but can those types of situations actually be fixed, or does that truly require, a wholesale, cleanup of leadership and most of the team members?
That's a tough one, because trust is what happens when mm-hmm. words and actions align over time. Right. So if you have someone that has alienated their team that bad that they've created a toxic work environment, that's mm-hmm. usually not a one-time thing. Right. Their words and actions have aligned over time to show that they are this person, and their people trust that they will be that person. So to suddenly have that person come in and say, hey, I've changed, it's like a wonderful life, it's all going to be different,
Right. Right.
Nobody trusts that. So they have to realign their words and actions over time, which means they really have to want to do it. People stick with what's comfortable because it's what they've done. So there better be a real good reason for that person to change their behavior that drastically. It can be done, but it's unusual.
Yeah. And that's what I think that's what I struggle with when I look at organizations, and again, I never wish bad on anybody, but it seems to me a lot of times in those situations and scenarios, that person who has eroded all the trust has had to go through something traumatic themselves, and then I wouldn't say that they're broken, but they come out a very different person on the other end, and again, don't want to see that happen to people. But a lot of times when they come out on the other end, they're completely different, and they see where they've made a mistake, and then again, like I say, it's tough to again build that trust and rapport back.
Yes, it's so much easier to build it up and keep it built, because the second you break it down, it's that trust factor. No, like, and trust. If people don't trust you, they're not going to be willing to believe you and go with you. So.
So what's the key to teaching this and getting people to understand and embrace this early in life? Because obviously there are some people, and I'm going to say you and I are probably those people that have always had it, right? Or maybe we learned it from our parents. Maybe we learned it from another significant other in our inner circle, but how do we teach this in a way that is going to really affect the masses or bunches of people at the same time?
If I lived in a perfect Melissa world where I could do whatever I wanted to do, the best thing we could do is actually start instilling this early. Other countries actually use what's called social emotional learning. And unfortunately, in our country, they've kind of twisted it. So it doesn't necessarily mean what it used to mean in these other places, but they actually learn pro-social skills like empathy. And they do it starting at like age 5 and 6, and it'll go all the way through until they're like 16. So these skills are actually embedded in these kids as skills, so that you're not trying to teach it later when it becomes harder to teach. Because empathy is this really broad thing. There is a biological basis, that we are born with it to some degree. Now, some people have more than others, but it is there for most people. There are a small subset that don't really have any, your psychopaths, narcissists, Machiavellians, but most of us have it. But there's also, it also has footing in psychology, in philosophy, in neurobiology. So it covers all these different areas. It goes so far beyond just being a feeling. And to just all of a sudden, someone's in an MBA program at 25 and say, here, use empathy. It's like, well, I don't know what to do with that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just not going to work.
No.
Yeah, that's almost like saying, if you're right-handed, start writing with your left hand.
What's the problem? Just use your other hand.
Yeah, it's just not going to work.
No.
But that's really what we're dealing with, and I think a lot of times also people don't truly understand what empathy is either.
Yeah,
and they think that empathy means that you tell somebody something and you get your way because you've told them that, and that's that. What do you think of that?
I think that unfortunately, there will always be someone looking to get that return on investment, that it's a transaction.
Yeah.
I give you this, you give me that. And there will always be those people. One of the things I say is that having empathy doesn't mean you don't have boundaries.
Right.
That there will always be people that will take advantage of that, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have it. Just, you need to be aware. And
setting those boundaries, I think sometimes is is difficult too, because knowing what those boundaries should actually be, and how they're kind of fluid with different people as well.
Yes.
And I think about it from a business perspective. Um, people think that being treated fairly is the same, but it's not. That's part of the issue in language as well.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. I actually talk about this, how kindness and nice is not the same thing. You can be nice. Nice is a social construct. Nice is a societal thing. It's how we treat each other,
right,
so that life is smoother. Kindness is something where you're actually legitimately looking out for the other person. There's a give and take. It's a different thing. So you can be nice and not be kind at all. Just like you can be kind and not be especially nice.
And again, that's another one of those things that I think people truly need to understand.
Yes.
And act on that, right? Because people can see through things much better than you think that they actually can.
Yes. Yes.
It's gosh, I love what you're doing with this. So let's talk about your book a little bit. Tell us about it. Because I've read a good portion of it, and it's in there. You get a little bit deeper into your story, and I don't want to get into that, but you use your story as examples of empathetic leadership, and so instead of me talking about you tell us about your book.
So really the only reason I bring my story into it is just to show how damaging unempathic leadership can be.
Yeah.
And through the book, I want to be able to bring in this narrative so that people can say, oh yeah, I recognize parts of this, or I understand bits of that, because that's the big thing. I know other people see this too. You and I do. We've talked about this.
Right.
Other people understand that there's a severe lack of something, and what are we going to do about it? So in the book, I actually make the case why businesses should do this, how it actually does create better profit, productivity, and innovation, and why, with more generational friction, with the advent of AI, with big tech, with big data, that people and companies and leaders who don't actually put this in place are only going to stand to lose as things keep moving quicker and farther into the future.
Yeah. And in your book, you chapter 8 is about communication. And you talk about the Holmes report, and how much we're spending, or how much organizations are actually spending in terms of replacing employees, all these types of things. And it's an extraordinary amount of money.
Yes. Yeah. That's why I put in the examples that I did, because it's such a big amount of money that it's hard to actually get a hold of how much it is.
Yeah, it's insane. And I like that you broke it down into big businesses, big corporations, into smaller organizations, and maybe a bigger organization can absorb that the financial cost. Understand there's a difference between the financial cost and the human cost. They may be able to absorb that financial cost, but the smaller organizations may not be able to absorb that financial cost, and they definitely can't absorb that human cost.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is when they lose these humans, they're not only losing the cost for what's happening today, they're losing institutional knowledge. They're losing the innovation that could come later. They're losing all of the future that goes along with that human being. It's not a machine part where you pull one part in and you throw the other part out. It goes so much deeper than that. And they don't quite realize just how deep this can go.
Yeah. And how long it can go, right? It can go deep and long. I mean, just think about how long it takes to replace somebody. It could be 9 months to a year from the time somebody leaves to the time you get somebody hired and you get them back to the skill level or the proficiency level of the person that left, and how much time has been lost, uh, how much human capital has been spent, right?
Yes.
And so there's, to me, a lot of times I think we focus a lot on the financial piece, which is important, obviously, but we completely discount and disregard that human piece, that human capital piece, and what it does not only to the organization, what it does to the coworkers on that team, what it does to that unit, and to the overall business itself.
Yeah. No, it absolutely does. And I think this is part of the things that we're missing when we look at the big cost. It's not just the cost that comes all the way down to the bottom line. It's all those costs above it. What is happening with the coworkers? What is happening with the leadership? How much time are we having to spend in interviews with this person to try and get somebody else in? How much time are we spending trying to retrain them? And as people have to continue to go through this mill, it does damage. So you're damaging the people that then go out into the next job, or the coworkers, or the team, and the vertical integration of these people. And, people aren't machines. We shouldn't be treating each other like this.
No, we shouldn't. And let's just talk about it from an academic perspective. And just so everybody understands, academia is not real world stuff, right? But in academia, how long does it take to replace a faculty member? It takes a year. It takes an entire year. If you're allowed to rehire for that position, because sometimes you're not, and that could take 2 to 3 years.
Yes.
Right.
Or you might lose the position altogether. Yep. And now that falls on everybody else.
It absolutely does, which hurts the students.
Yes.
Which is that's the bottom line, right? So, as a faculty member, yes, it hurts me from a coworker, colleague, etc. And okay, that's one thing. But now when we start talking about we're hurting the students, who it's our job as faculty, and it's our job from the institution perspective to prepare these students, for life and jobs and careers. And now we don't have a qualified person to teach them. And so maybe, could you imagine if I'm called in to cover French horn? What am I going to teach them? Seriously. Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but
happens.
Sam,
that happens
all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, even within a department, if you're in an engineering department and you've got an electrical engineer versus a mechanical engineer, well, what's the problem? Can't you just do that?
No. Sorry. Exactly.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And again, I don't look at academia as real world. I mean, that's in a completely different world all its own. But the reality is when you get out into business, it could be, 6 to 9 months to replace somebody. And the time for interviews and well, let's get into it. The interview process, I think, is antiquated across the board as well. But
yes.
Again, different story for a different day. But it's in how we communicate ourselves, our value, both from the organization interviewer perspective and the potential employee perspective. I think there needs to be adjustments and changes all the way around there. But But in chapter 8, you have what's called is it Johari? Johh? Okay, can you explain that? Because I think this is a critical piece that our listeners can actually, if they can understand this is something that they can put into practice today and understand some communication flaws or how they communicate and maybe where some miscommunications or drop communications can come from if they can understand this.
Yeah, totally. The Johari window is really nice, actually, because it can be applied to so many things. But in that chapter specifically, we're talking communication. And so if you picture it, you're looking like a window, right? There's 4 quadrants. So really what it comes down to is what you know, what you don't know, what others know, what others don't know. So you can start putting this into a communication context. Like, if you're looking at this problem, well, what do you know about this problem? Well, what do you not know about this problem? Well, what do others know about that problem? Because that can feed into what you know and what you don't know. What do others not know about this problem? This is how you can pull your communication in to help them understand what's going on. So in doing that, it kind of helps flesh it out to what's happening internally, reflection, and what's happening externally, which is more self-awareness. Because so much of what happens, there's this disconnect between, what I think I know and what's actually happening.
Right.
And this lets you actually break that down. You can say, well, so do I actually know what I think I know? Or, if I'm getting feedback and people are being honest with me, do I maybe really not know as much as I thought I did?
Exactly. And I think that's so important to understand. I tell people a lot that, when I was 21, I knew everything. And now I'm not sure that I know what I know, and that's really a good place to be open to admitting that you don't know something, to be open to admitting that, I probably need to learn a little bit more in this, or understand that I may be wrong, or I may have misunderstood this, or I may have not have done what I needed to that. So it's okay to not know. It's okay to tell people that you don't know. It's okay to be open to being wrong and those types of things. I think that builds credibility. I think that builds your own personal knowledge base, and also helps you to help other people.
Totally. Well, and it leaves you open to the person who does know.
Yes.
It gives an opening for that person to say, well, wait, yeah, I can help you with this. Whereas otherwise I'll probably just be like, well, sounds like they got it handled.
Melissa, I don't have to handle.
I don't either. The more I know, the more I know I don't know.
Exactly. Oh, well, Melissa, where can people connect with you? This has been awesome. Where can they connect with you?
So the best place is probably on my website, and it's EQ V as in Victor, IA, empathy. And you can find me there. You can reach out to me. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. LinkedIn is where I'm at the most. And I also have a podcast of my own called The Empathic Leader. So I do a little bit on YouTube there as well.
That's awesome. And they can buy your book pretty much anywhere books are sold?
Absolutely. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and there'll be an audiobook version coming out probably in about a month or so.
Oh, good. So, real quick, before I forget, is your TED Talk going to be out soon? Is it out? I haven't been able to find it.
It isn't out yet, but The good news is it's because I actually got an editor's pick, which is like in TEDx world. See, I didn't even know this existed, but it.
High five.
Yeah.
Melissa, that is awesome. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. I'm excited.
Will you let me know when it comes out? Because I'd love to see it and obviously share that with the community. That's phenomenal.
Thank you. And I'd be more than happy to.
Well, Melissa, this has been great. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I really do appreciate it. And, I know our listeners are going to get a ton of value from you, and that I can't thank you enough for.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. Thanks to your audience for listening, and just, I appreciate the chance to talk about empathy anytime anyone will let me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Perfect. Thank you.
Be sure to visit speakingwithconfidencepodcast.com to get your free ebook, The Top 21 Challenges for Public Speakers and How to Overcome Them. You can also register for the Forming for Public Speaking course. Always remember, your voice has the power to change the world. We'll talk to you next time. Take care.